Welcome to Lockdown History with Mr. Marr. Quick 2-minute summaries of a range of different history topics. In today's episode we're looking at one of the major events from the 20th century, which was the Russian Revolution. This was a major event which took place during the First World War and saw a huge change in the government of Russia. Before we look at this though, let's consider what life was like before the revolution. The simple reality was people in Russia were angry, and they had good reason to be. The majority of people lived in extreme poverty. They either didn't have enough food to eat, or they suffered from problems such as poor working conditions, and this led to a huge amount of anger towards the government. There was also fury at the Great War itself. Russia was involved and huge numbers of people were dying and facing other sorts of problems. And as a result of all this, many people wanted to see a change in the government, including removing the Tsar, who was the leader of Russia. Indeed, in 1905, many of these conditions had led to a previous attempts at overthrowing the government, which had often involved violence, including Bloody Sunday. By February of 1917, people had had enough, and Russia underwent a revolution. This started out as a series of strikes, which in turn spread to riots in places such as Petrograd. It involved other groups as well, including people who had been protesting on International Women's Day. They were wanting major change. They wanted to end poverty. They wanted bread so they could feed their families, and they wanted out the Great War. As a result of all this, and when the Tsar realised he'd lost the support of even his own military, he was forced to abdicate power and hand over instead to a provisional government. The reality was though that the provisional government did not significantly improve lives. The problems of poverty that people had had still continued, and not only that, Russia remained part of the Great War. Because of all this, many people believed that further change was needed. In particular, a political group known as the Bolsheviks were led by a man called Vladimir Lenin. This was a communist group that wanted to see substantial further changes. And because many people continued to support them and believed not enough had been achieved by the February Revolution, the October Revolution saw the removal of the provisional government and a communist Russia existing. However, even this wasn't the end of the story. At this point, Russia became divided into two groups. The Whites supported the old system and the Tsar, and the Reds were the communists. They engaged in a civil war over a number of years, and this was a war that saw other countries in the world giving support to the Whites, but ultimately the Reds still emerged triumphant. This fully saw Russia become a properly communist country, and eventually led to the establishment of the Soviet Union. This would be one of the major events of the 20th century, and in particular would play a role in starting the Cold War, which involved the Soviet Union and the United States.